Today, I want to start with an introduction, and I'm going to start with two words: spontaneous arising. And so one of the things that we are learning with this course and workshop is for spontaneous arising to happen inside of ourselves with our own thoughts and feelings and expressions and activities. And adults, I think, in general, are conditioned to work in a different modality, which is planning and programming and then executing what they've decided to do, especially when speaking or teaching. But we have to remember we're in a Montessori context. And so what did our mentor, Maria Montessori, say? She herself never used notes. She, of course, prepared herself immensely for any of her courses and all of her work. She worked late into the night. She wrote and thought and felt into everything she was creating. But when it came time to present, they say, the myth is, the lore we have about her is that she had these sheets of paper, so everyone was convinced she had prepared her lectures, but when you looked at her papers, they were empty. And so she too was allowing spontaneous arising to happen. And what does spontaneous arising allow for us to do? It really frees us. It gives us the freedom of choice of our spiritual flow to happen from within, and not from within, starting from the heart and coming through, and not from the head. And why do we want to be in that kind of flow when we're sharing our gifts with the world, when we're working with other people? Because that's truly our authentic expression. And that's what Montessori was asking for us to offer children, is a space where they can spontaneously arise, where they can have their authentic self flow through them. The word normalization is used in Montessori speak, which is the language Montessorians speak outside of society's normal language. Normalization in normal language would mean simply spontaneous arising of the child within a freedom of, within a context where there's freedom of choice, freedom of movement, and freedom to be who you are for each child. So now let's put that into the context of the newborn. This is the same thing that we hope to offer a newborn, every single newborn child, because, and every single birthing mother. And I often focus on and use the words just about the newborn, but anytime we speak about the newborn, we're speaking about the mother-baby dyad. So really, we're speaking about this couple who are actually one person for some amount of time before this spiritual separation, this psychological separation of one being from another. And there's a period of time, hopefully, that takes. Although I'm spontaneously going to say postpartum depression might be partly that separation was broken, that connection was broken too early, and that is a spiritual trauma on the mother, and that is what we're defending, what we're guarding, what we're hoping for every mother-child dyad to have, is their connection until the spontaneous separation happens, because one being is growing away from another being into oneself. I know there's a textbook called The Psychological Birth of the Infant by some of the more academic people in this topic. I would like to present very briefly Michel Odent's idea of childbirth and the evolution of Homo sapiens. So this is my Italian copy of the book, which is called Birth and the Evolution of Homo sapiens. In English, it's Childbirth and the Evolution of Homo sapiens. And Michel Odent is a philosopher of birth and an evolutionary anthropologist. He's really looking at, millions of years of evolution or 10,000 years of evolution. He's looking at what's happening in the species. He's looking at what shifts are happening, and he's not judging them so much as he's identifying them so that we can be critical about what we're doing and make choices that may be different than what we are doing. And he's always asking this question, what was the purpose? What is the purpose of a socialized birth? So that means that we are not birthing like our mammalian evolutionary ancestors. We're not birthing like the first humans in privacy, complete isolation, where those hormones, those shy hormones, have a chance to come through because there's no sensation of being observed. Because there's warmth and safety within someone or someones, in the case of elephants, who are actually holding you, but holding you in a way that they're giving you the decency of your privacy. Because we know that oxytocin, one of the hormones that our bodies use to open up, to relax, to let the cervix become a gateway for that child to come through, requires intense privacy, as do all of our sexual hormones. So why, he asks, why in the world? And I don't know if this is his take on it, but I think I've come to this from listening to him, is that, we have required over the course of time a lot of aggression between peoples, because this is how you control resources, and this is how peoples have their needs secured for physical property, for hunting grounds, for it's all a struggle for survival, part of this evolutionary survival of the fittest. So having babies come into the world and experience a lot of stress, where there's an inner angst deep inside of them that then can come through when they're men, when they're women, has served humanity, because we have the potential for this aggression. I deeply believe that this potential for aggression is a conditioned response to the basic needs of babies and mommies not being met, and a deep inner rage, a deep inner sadness, a deep inner fear that is hidden. It's not being expressed in life, but it's a potential to be very, very dissatisfied and angry later in life. So I want to tell a story from my observations, the 2 years that I spent going to the hospital, not daily, but sometimes 4 or 5 days a week. And I'd spend 2-3 hours, maybe 5 hours, roaming the maternity ward, the birthing area as well. I had complete access and was welcomed into every birth that was happening. So I observed lots of labors and births. I observed lots of newborns in their first golden hours. And this is just a parenthesis. For some reason, we've settled on the golden hour. But what I observed was it was 2 hours that was needed of uninterrupted time for that newborn to wake up to instincts and begin to search for the breast, and all the reflexes of the mouth and the tongue and the head turning, and all these instinctive behaviors that are how the baby comes back in deep connection with the mother through attaching to the breast, beginning to drink the colostrum. Now, in Michel's book that I was just looking through last night, in the very introduction of that book, he talks about research, meta-studies, meta-analysis, thousands and thousands of cases, and looking at how birth has happened and how much time it takes for the woman for labor. And they were looking at a set of births in the 50s and a set of births in the early 2000s. So the 50s, I think there was something like 6,000 individuals being studied, or some smaller amount of cases. And in the 2000s, it was, 40,000 or 60,000. So it was many, many more in the second set. But on average, every birth was, I think, 2 hours longer, every labor. So he was simply saying labor takes more time in the modern era. And so that's a question, why, how could that be? So I think that golden hour, and this is still my parentheses, excuse me for a long tangent, so it could have been a golden hour in the 80s or 90s, and now it's a golden 2 hours simply because it takes more time for instincts to come on board because of distractions in the environment or whatever it might be. And I'm thinking it was Nils Bergman who had research, or maybe it was also Michel Odent who wrote about this, but this breast crawl, which is when the baby's instincts to walk up the mother's body when she's in a reclined position. I can do it myself. I can get on the breast myself. I don't need my mouth to be placed across your nipple. I don't need any help. Just give me an environment, the skin of my mother, the smell of my mother's colostrum, and I will welcome Veronique. And I will get there. I will get to the breast. So the research I remember reading was that in African or indigenous, it was somehow people that are much closer to our evolutionary period of birthing. That period of time was something like, I think it was Niels Bergman's research. It was something like 12 minutes. So the golden hour shrinks down to 12 minutes. So in general, this is all to say that here's our context, here's our environment, our social environment, our physical environment, and it is influencing how instincts come online between the mother and the baby. Close parentheses. So back to my story of my observations in the hospital. So where I was observing is not at the height of the most natural birth, sensitive birth, sweet birth, whatever you may want to call it. It was very much a few Italian public hospitals where things were happening in a way that was very antiquated. However, they had protocols that were very modern and they were very proud of them. And one of them is called rooming in. And so this is not taking the baby away from the mother and putting it in the nursery to be cared for. It is saying, mother, here's your baby, you keep your baby, and we will support you in supporting your baby in the first days of life. So I was observing that the babies were in the nursery quite a lot of time, quite a huge amount of time. And so I got to wondering, well, how much time are these babies in the nursery and how much time are these babies with their mother? And it came to be about 50-50. So they were spending about 12 hours a day in the nursery and about 12 hours a day with their mother. And this was under this protocol of rooming in, which means help the mother take care of her baby herself, keep the mother and baby together. Do not separate the mother and baby. But unfortunately, every morning, the doctors would come and do a visit, and the doctors don't go into the rooms to visit the baby. So the nurses collect the babies so that the babies are all ready for the doctor when the doctor arrives at around 8 in the morning. So to do that, they get them around 6:30 in the morning, get them all undressed so that they're, it can be a quick process of exam. Then after the exam, the babies are returned to the mothers. And then there's the visiting hours at 1 in the afternoon. They had visiting hours twice a day. So collect all the babies, pretty them all up, put them in the window, open the curtains, close the curtains, afternoon visit for the doctor. So keep the babies, take the babies back to their mothers. In the evenings, they would be brought back into the nursery for bathing, and they would bathe these babies once a day to make sure that they were kept clean and hygienic. And then returned to the mothers for a few hours, and then brought back into the nursery for the nighttime. So this one hospital kept the babies at night, whereas another hospital left the babies with the mothers at night. But all of this comes to the fact that there is absolutely no rhythm that can be established between a mother and her child. If you're in this hospital for 2 to 3 days, and every 2 to 3 hours, a nurse comes and collects your baby, and then brings your baby back to you. And these mothers would say to me, they come in and they encourage me to breastfeed or put the baby to the breast, but my baby is sleeping all the time she's with me. And when I hear my baby, often, in the nursery, I know my baby's cry. I hear my baby crying. And so they would spend these periods of time under stress because they've been separated, which for a newborn is a case of life and death. I've been separated from my mother. I might be dying. I might be separated forever. I have no idea. So crying in the first days of life when you're separated from your mother is truly a desperate cry for, come find me, mother. I'm in need of you. But then they would be so exhausted or topped off, because often they were being fed artificial milk in order for them to grow fast enough so that they could be released, because another protocol was they needed to weigh a certain amount post-birth or they couldn't be released. So the nurses would actually sneak without recording this information because they wanted to get these babies out the door as well. So the jewel that I would like to share with you today from this story is how important it is for spontaneous arising, for a newborn to find his or her rhythm of eating and sleeping, awake time, and this initial rhythm of life, which is a very primal rhythm of life, because you've been in the womb and you haven't been eating. You've been on your mother's, drip system. You are always fed. You have never felt hunger. You're not in a cycle. Again, sleeping, it's very different outside the womb than inside the womb. So you have to find your own rhythm, and each person's rhythm is very different. So what we do in this situation where we interrupt the first days of life, where a baby is outside of the womb, through our need to monitor and our need to understand and our need to test all the different levels, and to do it in a way that we separate mother from child, or we interrupt this child. Here again is one of our foundational Montessori ideas, is to not interrupt the person. So if we're applying Montessori philosophy to a newborn baby, we do not interrupt that child at the beginning of its life as she is trying to find her own inner spontaneous rhythms around eating and sleeping, which are our fundamental health factors, health building factors. Okay, we have to sleep well and we have to eat well at the beginning of life. And we only do those things well when we do them according to what's the information that our body is giving us. And if we are in this this push and pull, this roller coaster ride of the first few days of life, think about what this newborn typically goes through in the first days of life, that they are having to cope with and adapt to and respond to and react to, when it's not what could be the ideal situation, which is complete protection from every interruption and complete tranquility and constant presence of mother. So this is how I'd like to introduce our topic today: the basic needs of the human being and the basic needs of the newborn human being are basically the same as we've been looking at. All of these basic needs, just as Montessori's philosophies can be applied across the lifespan, whether you're a newborn or whether you're an elder person or whether you're simply an adult. We understand that our basic needs or other people's basic needs that we're working with are the foundation of their well-being. And it's much harder to extrapolate that for a newborn being because we just like to think that they're going to sleep and they're going to eat and they're going to grow, and that's all that they really need is a bit of time to get through that first period. But what they really need, and I emphasize this because this is how we deviate the normal path of development from the moment of birth, is we interrupt how they are coming into their rhythm. And they basically can't get a rhythm. They don't find a rhythm. And then, just as birth has to be managed once the natural rhythms have been interrupted, life has to be managed. And so newborn sleep patterns are managed with sleep, what do we call that? Sleep training. We have to be taught to sleep. We have to be forced to eat with all kinds of ways that are not natural. But once we've interrupted nature's plan, we often do need to manage. Of course, we have this beautiful hope that we can always return. We can always go back. I'll finish on this thought. The research that looks at all of the destruction that happens to nature through our hands, our man's hands, our civilization's hands. If we just back off again, nature takes care of herself. She always recovers. So we have the power to abstain and not intervene at any point, and recovery and healing can be achieved through becoming the observer, creating the optimal environment, and allowing for spontaneous expression. So thank you for being present here today, for coming to this workshop, to this space with Ruth and I today, for sharing this this incredibly important exploration of the basic needs of babies.
Thank you, Karin, for that. So much to digest there. The two key phrases or key thoughts that are sitting with me at the moment is the importance of slowing down, and that is just such an important step in what you're speaking about. Well, in any situation really, because this book that I'm busy reading called Hold On to Your Kids, which is more kind of working with adolescents, because that's the phase of parenting at the moment. But yeah, the importance of slowing down, that in the modern world, that, having children 30 or 40 years ago was different because our working lives have just become much, much fuller as adults and that once upon a time there was, because there's this technological demand on adults, that ability to walk away from work is much harder nowadays, and to slow down and be present with our children. But I think, any situation where things just feel like hurried or rushed, and where we feel like we need to be getting something done, actually we need to be doing the opposite. We need to be just actually slowing down and becoming present and just observing and seeing, a bit like what we did when we started the call, really. And then the other one that the other key phrase is first do no harm, and it's just so interesting that when we are born into a medical environment, that there's all the stuff that's deemed so necessary, and it's all justified. You know, oh, I couldn't have skin to skin because I couldn't get breastfeeding right because, and it's, you know, at the end of the day, I find it makes me so angry, and I get so frustrated, and that's why I can't work in those environments, because I just because I get so angry and frustrated, which isn't helpful to anybody. But we're not slowing down. We're not first going, okay, first do no harm. Like, what is actually going on here? You know, is this baby feeding? Yes. Is this baby responsive? Yes. Is there good coloring? Yes. Is, you know, just like, and then if we're seeing a deviation from what a baby, and because we're separating mother and baby, aren't we, in those situations? Whereas actually we should be looking at mother and baby together. That's what I'm going to say. That is the basic need. And when we separate, we're creating stress in both mother and baby, and creating a need to run these tests, because babies will lose weight if they're away from their mothers, and mothers won't recover properly if they're away from their babies. Whereas if we were to actually monitor them together, if we found ways of teaching the people who were taking care of them in those early days to do all of that while mother and baby are together, and also to empower mothers to follow their instincts and monitor themselves, because I think so often what happens is that mothers are so disempowered in those situations, they don't feel like the experts, and so they don't actually even stand up for themselves in those situations, because they don't feel knowledgeable or empowered. And because, again, there's this thing of, well, I'd rather be certain that everything is okay, and so I hand over, which is such an unfortunate initial imprint for parenting to be giving to mothers, you know, because once mothers leave, they're the ones who have to parent this child. But if the imprint of parenting that's been made is, I need to hand it over to the experts, I don't actually know, then yeah, we become dependent on the outside and not the within. So yes, slow down and first do no harm. Thank you.